Back in April of 2024, long before getting traded to Dallas, Anthony Davis made a bold statement in regards to the Defensive Player of the Year award. "I'll never get it. They're not giving it to me. The league doesn't like me. I'm the best defensive player in the league. I can switch 1 through 5. I can guard the pick and roll the best in the league from a big man standpoint." This got me wondering, and it made me want to do a deeper dive into the numbers and history of Anthony Davis's prowess as a defender. In 13 seasons, Anthony Davis has finished in the top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting only twice. Once in the 2017-18 season, where he finished 3rd, though that race wasn't close at all. Gobert ran away with it. And again in 2020, where he finished 2nd, losing to Giannis in a much closer race, though it still wasn't really close at all. Davis hasn't finished in the top 3 in voting since then. But if you were to ask anybody the question of the most consistently dominant defender since 2012, it's hard to say it's not Anthony Davis. Ever since he entered the league, his physical gifts, length, combined with his insane athleticism and lateral quickness, he had all the tools to become the greatest defender of the modern generation. While most athletes of his caliber only rely on their physical attributes, Davis is incredibly smart, equipped with a high basketball IQ that allows him to flourish in any defensive scheme.
Who's going to stop Lowry? Well, it's AD. Hello.
However, despite all this, his accomplishments defensively have never garnered the attention of the NBA media and the voters. Why is that? Let's take a look. But before we start, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by expectations to make immediate, dramatic life changes in 2025? Whether it's struggling to meet your own personal goals you set for yourself or feeling anxiety about falling behind in life. Let me introduce you to the sponsor of this video, BetterHelp. Sometimes I feel down when I'm making videos and going through the grind, and not meeting the expectations I set for myself. With BetterHelp, you'll fill out a questionnaire and match with a therapist in as little as a couple of days, with their vast, diverse network of 30,000 plus licensed professionals. They'll connect you with a therapist who's the right fit for you. And if they're not, you can always change to a different one at no extra cost. You can talk about your feelings and how you can process them in a way that injects motivation and creativity to help you reach your goals. For YouTubers like myself, being in a space like this, perhaps it's best to find someone who can help you compartmentalize your thoughts. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/andyhoops and get 10% off your first month of therapy.
Basketball blocked by Anthony Davis, got it back though, and he will drive it.
Stu, I'm going to give you a note that it's hard to believe as AD swats.
Running the floor. Shaman, another block. Davis took that one off the backboard.
Anthony Davis's individual defensive dominance can only be matched by a handful of players in history. However, the main argument that worked against Davis's case for DPOY has always been the fact that his teams are usually never among the top defensive teams in the league. As the NBA wave of analytics swarmed across the sport, came a trend for the Defensive Player of the Year to be awarded to a player on an elite defensive team. Unfortunately for Davis, for most of his time in New Orleans, the franchise failed to build a competent roster around him, especially defensively. This is what their defensive rating season by season looked like in his 7 years in New Orleans. Only one season did they finish in the top 10 in defense. Most oftenly, they'd be near the bottom of the league, among the worst defensive teams in basketball. Back then, the general idea was Davis was an excellent individual defender, but not a great leader on defense. While he excelled in his own right, he wasn't a very talkative guy, and had a hard time learning the ropes when it comes to leading through communication and using his voice to uplift his team. This was most evident by this locker room interaction back in 2016 that questioned Davis's leadership. During preseason, his new teammate Tim Frazier looked up to him for guidance, but realized Davis was not talking to anyone on the team. This led to this infamous exchange. Quote, "AD, are you gonna say something?" To which Davis responded, "Oh, my bad." Later, he clarified to a reporter what this was all about. "I wasn't expecting to say nothing, but it shows you these guys look up and look forward to me saying stuff because they want to follow. They want to be a part of something special. I'll always remember that. That was eye-opening. His former coach, Alvin Gentry, said that's the biggest thing that Davis has lacked for his entire career, or at least his entire time in New Orleans. He's always had the ability and talent of the number one option, but it took a while for him to embrace the role of a communicator and a true leader. Of course, that's not the only reason his Pelicans were not good at defense. Just as much blame goes to the personnel and coaching, too. Outside of Drew Holiday, the Pelicans never had another above-average defender for Davis's entire duration with the franchise. While Davis generated some noise in the race for DPOY, he was, in all honesty, never a serious contender to win it. It's one of those awards similar to MVP, where it's incredibly hard to win if you're not on a winning team, and he only made the playoffs twice in 7 seasons in New Orleans. Team success does matter for these individual awards, and sadly, Davis did not experience much early on.
The Pelicans have agreed to finally trade Anthony Davis to the Lakers. Now here's the compensation package. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and 3 first-round picks.
Let's take a step back and look at another player, the guy who most voters considered as the best defender in the league for several years now. In the modern era of the NBA landscape, we tend to judge a big man's defense on how well he defends the rim, or at least that's what the voters deem as the most significant impact a player can make. Rudy Gobert is a player who exemplifies this characteristic. Not only does he routinely rank near the top of the NBA in opponents' field goal percentage at the basket, holding opponents to an average of 58% shooting within 5 feet, compared to the league average of 66%. Not just that, but he deters opponents from even trying to attempt shots at the basket with his mere existence on the floor. In the 4 years that Rudy Gobert won Defensive Player of the Year, whether it's Utah or Minnesota, opponents only take roughly 1/4 of their shots at the basket when he's on the court. For example, the average team nowadays takes around 35% of their shots at the basket against the average center. Essentially, Gobert's presence on the floor changes his entire team's defensive dynamic, and the results speak for themselves. He has anchored several top 5 defenses throughout his NBA career. Upon his arrival to Minnesota, he transformed the team to the NBA's #1 defense. So why did I mention all of these things about Gobert? Well, it's because, unlike Anthony Davis, Gobert's defense is easier to quantify. The numbers, the team defensive rating, they speak for themselves on how impactful his defense is. There's a visible change in how teams approach the Timberwolves when Gobert is playing. For Davis, however, his strengths on defense are harder to quantify. For example, before Victor Wembanyama came into the league, it was Anthony Davis, who was considered by most league executives as the best help defender and the most versatile defender in the entire league. Now, best help defender and most versatile defender, while I do agree that Davis has an obvious case to be the best in both of these categories, it's hard to quantify that in numbers. There's no stat that measures how many times Anthony Davis helps out a teammate. There's no numbers to say how many times he's had to cover for somebody. At least, numbers that are easily accessible. While deflections is a newer stat the NBA started recording, there's no stat that measures how many times his long arms even prevents a pass from happening in the first place. There's also no concrete definition of, most versatile defender. Like, what does that even mean? Anthony Davis himself mentions that he can guard 1 through 5, and he claims he's the best pick-and-roll defender in the league. But according to the numbers, during the season he made this comment, he allowed 1.30 points per possession when defending the roll man. Gobert, on the other hand, allowed only 1.13 points per possession defending the roll man.
Shows you the parity in these 30 teams. Tillman into Gobert. Look at that. Give me that.
That's not surprising. I think most of us agree from the eye test that Gobert is better at defending the roller in a pick and roll, which is usually a big man. So if we go with Davis's theory that he's the best at defending 1 through 5, surely he should have an advantage when it comes to defending guards and wing players, right? Well, here are the numbers for that. Davis is correct. He is near the top of the NBA in how often he defends the ball handler in a pick and roll. 10.7 possessions per game, he does that, and he holds them to 0.88 points per possession, which is great. Except, look at the players ahead of him. Rudy Gobert, in the year he won his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award, he defended the ball handlers more often and held them to a lower efficiency than Davis. This doesn't take into consideration other things, like the fact that the Wolves, even without Gobert, are such a far superior defensive team than the Lakers without Davis. They're horrible defensively without Davis on the court, so he has to overcompensate for his teammates. And that doesn't show up in the numbers either.
Holiday steps back. His three scoring 144, 145. Not coming in here, the Lakers.
Anyway, the best way to sum up his defense are these plays right here.
Jones up top, Desmond Bane, the drive, leans in, blocked by Davis.
Points in the paint and then, of course, transition baskets. Bane denied by Davis. Front. Bane, the cross, denied by Davis.
Davis, in the playoffs, is arguably the best weak side help defender in the entire league. The way he gets blocks and steals isn't because he's getting them in a straight-up one-on-one. He gets them because he comes out of nowhere and saves the possession when his teammates get blown by, because they can't keep their guy in front of them. While it's clear there's plenty of other bigs who are better at contesting the basket and protecting the paint, there's no bigs who can compare to Davis's speed of recovery and team defense.
Curry, a running start, goes right at Davis, keeps that dribble alive, turns, goes back again, blocked by Davis.
While most would say that Davis blossomed into a complete player in Los Angeles and reached a level that far exceeded his time in New Orleans, there are several issues working against his case for Defensive Player of the Year. For one, his injuries. Ever since he joined the Lakers, he's suffered so many random injuries, causing him to miss like 30 or 40 games a season. There's a reason the nickname Anthony Day to Davis became a trend. Nobody knows if he'll play until it's game time. Over the years, his plethora of injuries have hurt his image, and perhaps this is something that lingers on the back of everyone's minds. I bet when the voters look at Davis, the first thing they wonder is, how many games did he play? The animosity towards Davis is more than just that, however. Remember his final year in New Orleans? His departure from the Pelicans left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. Anthony Davis was the first superstar who strong-armed his organization in a way that was deemed unacceptable, flat out refusing to play for his team unless he got traded. He started a trend that forced the NBA to initiate a new legislation in their collective bargaining agreement. Davis's refusal to play was followed by the likes of Ben Simmons, James Harden, among others. When Davis stated, quote, "The league doesn't like me," he's referring to this, his past antics that the media will never forget, and maybe that's why, even to this day, he's not the player the league wants to promote. That's the story of his entire NBA career, one of the greatest perennial superstars of our generation, in a similar age bracket as guys like Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic. Yet Davis is always overshadowed, no matter how hard he tries. And for a major award like Defensive Player of the Year, you need some sort of name recognition. You need some way to get voters to notice you, and frankly, Davis doesn't stand out anymore. And the league doesn't want him to stand out. Prior to his trade to Dallas, Davis spent 6 years in LA as LeBron's teammate, yet still was seen as being under his shadow. You'd imagine players who play in a fabulous, gargantuan market that is Los Angeles, along with the most marquee superstar of the modern era, you'd imagine Davis would get talked about way more. I mean, he's like half the reason why they won their championship, and even took over as the best player on the team as LeBron got older. Instead, besides the memes of his injuries, not even his best moments get recognized as much as they should have. A man once considered a freak of nature, who can slide into any roster and improve them in ways unimaginable. Davis never gets the credit he deserves. Perhaps one day he will get that award he's been lusting for his entire life. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Anthony Davis. Do you think there was any particular year where he did deserve Defensive Player of the Year? Do you see him winning one in the near future? He has mentioned several times that defense matters a lot to him, and he would like the award at some point in his career. But will he get it? Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, As always, I'll see you next time. Peace.